Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Wednesday drawing session with me, Frank Cho. There's my trusty Pentel mechanical pencil with 0.7 millimeter HB lead and my kneaded eraser. I will be drawing on my favorite paper, Strathmore Bristol board 300 series with vellum surface. I love the vellum surface because it has a bit of a tooth that grips the pencil very well. Today I am going to draw Wolverine versus Lady Deadpool. Now, I just saw the movie Deadpool and Wolverine, which I enjoyed. It was kind of it wasn't as smooth that I thought it was going to be, but overall, I actually enjoyed the movie. There are some kind of disjointed scenes, some forced humor and all, but overall, I was entertained and got a kick out of it, especially with a lot of the homages from the various different comic book from the source material from where they basically showcase some of the key comic book scenes. So I thought that was kind of hilarious. So Lady Deadpool, I have no idea who Lady Deadpool was until recently. I stopped collecting comics or stopped reading comics when right right around the time Deadpool became pretty big, and so like your typical comic company, once something becomes big, they will basically milk the hell out of it. So they decide to create a bunch of different variation of the same characters. They'll usually, the first thing they do is they'll change the gender and the race and different other stuff. That's the trend. That's the current trend right now. If there's a popular character, they'll go ahead and swap it for a different sex and stuff like that. Which when it was first done, it was kind of entertaining, but now it's becoming kind of tedious and very unoriginal. That being said, Lady Deadpool, again, going back to my earlier thought, I have no idea who Lady Deadpool was. So I did a little bit of research, and her, like most comic characters, is just crazy. So she is a Deadpool from another universe. Her name is Wanda Wilson, and she is a leader of the Deadpool Corps. So it's kind of like, I guess, like the Green Lantern Corps, but with a bunch of different Deadpool variations. So other than that, I just gave up trying to make heads or tail out of her character. But in the movie, she seemed pretty cool. She seemed well, I mean, she's basically a killing machine with a insane regeneration power. So when I was drawing this piece, I wanted to show her kind of in action. I was getting tired of just people standing around, and so in this drawing, I decided to have Lady Deadpool kneeing Wolverine in the head. That image just popped in my mind, and usually I just like run with it. So with everything, I basically draw the basic human anatomy, um, and I don't really add too much of the feminine traits until later on. So right now I'm just focusing on the proportions, the anatomy, and all that. And so when I'm drawing that, I'm basically drawing a very generic, general figure. So here I am drawing the her knee being thrust forward, and the opposite leg. So when you're drawing like action foes, it's always good to kind of tilt the figure forward or backward because it kind of conveys the energy. And so you don't want to draw too many figures, straight and uninspiring. If you're drawing action sequence, make sure you draw the figures moving and kind of tilting. So so what I like to do in my drawings, I tend to draw it and then redraw it, erase it and all that, erase it and redraw it. I decided that that leg wasn't quite in proportion, so I erased it and then redrew it. So most of the figures that I draw, they tend to be about 8 heads tall. In real life, the average height is about 6.5 heads, but I tend to draw all my figures about 8 heads tall. And that tends to be about roughly like a supermodel proportion, which you need because when you're drawing a comic book character, you're basically drawing a caricature. And so the women, you tend to draw women very beautiful and sexy. And then you draw also with the men, you tend to draw them very handsome and very muscular. So when you're drawing cartoons and comic books, um, you want to exaggerate their anatomy and figures. But I don't tend to exaggerate too much. I like realistic drawing, so I was heavily influenced by all the classically trained guys. So my drawing tend to be more realistic compared to my peers, who tend to go more. I noticed that they tend to go slightly toward more manga style, which is the hyper cartoonish proportion and and drawing and reactions and stuff like that. So I mean they're fun, but it's not really my cup of tea. So I tend to focus more on the more of a classic drawing sense. Now you'll see how I construct the anatomy. And there's the midline. Midline is roughly will show you where the spine is, and from there, you kind of like draw the build the anatomy from it. Now, once you learn the anatomy, really understand the anatomy, everything kind of it comes easy. So there I am drawing the foot, and I kind of always have different angles of the different body part. It adds to the more realistic nature of the drawings. So when you're drawing Wolverine, I tend to stick more to the original Wolverine proportion because I guess in the comic that I read when I first read Wolverine back when he made his first appearance, he's a very short guy. He was like 5'3", and because of the movie, he became this 6'2" guy, but in the comic book, he's actually a very short guy. So there I am, kind of playing around with the foot. I wasn't happy how the foot was looking, that leg was looking. So I decided, I'm gonna just kind of wing it later. Now this Wolverine face actually came out pretty good right off the bat. So you can see half the face is kind of hidden by her knee, just kind of add that realism of the impact of the knee into his cheek. So remember, when you're drawing action, keep it slightly off balance because she is leaning forward with her knee out, and he is kind of leaning back, completely knocked off his foundation. So she's leaning forward and he's leaning back. You can just feel the energy transfer from the knee to his face. So if you want to learn anatomy, I recommend that you look at a lot of bodybuilding magazine. It actually That's how I learned to draw the anatomy, by looking at bodybuilding magazines. Yeah, I'm not sure how tall Lady Deadpool is, but you can see that she is taller than Wolverine here. Again, I tend to draw Wolverine kind of short and blocky. Yeah, so the leg, you know, the leg didn't look quite right, so I'm just kind of, playing around with it. Those foreshortening angle is always tough, but you'll get the hang of it once you kind of draw enough. And also to create that extra three-dimensional depth, you kind of add the shadows. Adding shadows always make everything look more three-dimensional and more rounded and stuff like that. So actually, it was actually kind of cool to see Wolverine's headgear in the movie. That was something I kind of wanted to see in the movie, and I was actually very pleasantly surprised when they actually did it. Yeah, and to be honest with you, it didn't look that bad. I thought they kind of pulled it off, because sometimes when you translate a comic book into a real life movie, essentially real life, sometimes the costume just doesn't work, because it works in comic book, but in real life, it doesn't work. So I thought the Wolverine headgear was one of those costumes that will never work. But I was actually very surprised when they pulled it off in Deadpool versus Wolverine. So I was gonna make her butt bigger, but I decided, you know what, Lady Deadpool is more athletic, so I better give her make her a little bit more slender than I usually draw my females. So once you have the basic musculature down, then you can add the other details. Like you can add the for when drawing a woman, you can add the boobs and and kind of like tweak her hips. Make her more graceful, more feminine. The hard part for me when I draw a new character is the costume because with the classic superhero stuff, I've drawn so many classic superheroes. I can draw the costume, without too much problem. But when I'm drawing a new character, which I am not familiar with, I just struggle. So the problem with drawing a lot of current comics nowadays is there is no there is no style guide. When I started out way back in the late 90s, early 2000, they would give you a model sheet, or you have access to model sheets of the different superheroes, their costume, and all that. And then nowadays, they only send you links, and depending on the artist, there is basically there is no more art directors. So you have so many artists that goes off model. It's actually kind of like kind of annoying, especially for me who like to who's a very classic kind of guy. So I want the costumes to look a certain way, um, all across the board. But with the modern era of comic, there is no quality control. I hate to say, and there is no art director. So they let the artist just run wild, which is good and bad. Sometimes the artist will fix things that doesn't quite work in the original model sheet, but most times I feel that it kind of like deviates too much from the quality the core design of the character that it just looks weird. So whenever I draw a character, I try to make him the most give him the most classical features. Actually, I kind of like how that leg turned out, that bent knee to the face. and drawing shoes. I think being a comic book artist is one of the most hardest job in the art world because you have to create, make everything look realistic, or or have people know recognize it, what it is, and there are a lot of things that you have to draw out of your imaginations. So you have to know how to draw things realistically and also conjure up, imagine stuff that doesn't exist in the real world. And also you have to like design real world real world stuff, that you're not really, trained for. So the thing that I realized as I became a comic book artist, I really have to learn how to draw everything correctly. So that shoes, which is kind of funny. Like I'm not into shoes. I mean, I could care less about shoes, but there's so many like shoe fetish collectors out there, that will just go crazy about sneaker designs and stuff like that. And so you have to kind of pay attention how the shoe looks, which is like one of the most funniest thing that I ever come across. The guy who actually draws really cool shoes from time to time is Arthur Adam. Arthur Adam always draws these like cool little. He put all these like detail into the shoe wear. It's actually kind of fascinating and pretty impressive. Me, I try to keep it like a very general shape, basic shape, and because I like when I draw, I draw very, I like clean designs. So I'm not a big fan of all these little details. I like to draw everything very, there's, like a stylistic purpose and cleanness of the design. So adding the zipper with that zipper tag. Shading, non-stop shading. So I noticed that all the Deadpool, the costume anyway, has this shoulder pad. In the beginning, he didn't have like a shoulder pad, but as things evolved, people started drawing him with his shoulder pad. So it's not also very kind of like, it's very tough when you draw certain characters, especially popular characters, because they tend to have so many variation of it. And a lot of artists don't stay consistent with the costume, so that's always been a challenge. So for Lady Deadpool, I essentially put her in a the Deadpool costume and kind of streamlined it a bit, because I know that Deadpool have all these like bunch of pouches and knickknacks and all that. Something that Rob likes to draw. He loved drawing pouches. So just drawing those simplified creases and that kind of a skin tight outfit. And I notice all the Deadpool have these weird black bracelet. I'm not exactly sure what the purpose of it is, but it's part of the costume design. So Wolverine is one of my favorite character growing up, and Spider-Man and Wolverine and Punisher were three of my favorite characters growing up when I was reading Marvel as a kid. And when I got to write and draw Savage Wolverine during my tenure at Marvel, I thought it was a dream come true. I actually just had a great time writing and drawing that. Just adding the stubble because Wolverines always have a 5 o'clock shadow. So I decided to tweak the headgear a bit. The guy who drew really fantastic Wolverine is Paul Smith. So I just missed the John Byrne era of X-Men, and John Byrne is another guy whose take on Wolverine is absolutely fantastic. But I missed his run, and I came on board on the X-Men when Paul Smith took over, and Paul Smith has a animation background, so he tend to draw things very clean and simple. And I guess his design of Wolverine kind of like rubbed off on me. So I tend to draw when I draw Wolverine, I try to make it very clean and simple. And that's why I've always liked the brown and tan costume, because when John Byrne drew it, he drew the yellow and blue costume with the blue stripes. But my favorite Wolverine costume is the brown and tan costume. There's the forearm muscle. Yeah, once you know your anatomy, everything just comes naturally. I mean, so I'm sort of filling in the kind of the shadows and stuff like that. And of course, you got to add the hair. I mean, Wolverine is a very hairy man. Just adding the muscle fiber when when your people flex and or in a or straining, you can see the muscle fibers pop out and all that. Again, like that's mainly from like bodybuilding magazines and stuff like that. You kind of understand the human anatomy and how the muscle behaves and folds and and lie on the body. And Wolverine had this thick red belt. It's actually fascinating how much I remember just drawing the Wolverine costume because as a kid, I used to draw Wolverine so many times that I know all the costume details from that era. And Paul Smith did a fantastic job with drawing the X Men. He only did 11 issues, but I mean, in the 11 issues, he just really at the really added added so much to the X Men legacy. Yeah, I never quite understood why all the superheroes back then wore their underwear outside of the costume. There's the knee and the quad, the slope of the leg that's bent backward. Okay, so this is the part that I really didn't care for growing up. And this Wolverine had this kind of like this flare tip boots. So now, black and tan Wolverine costume was designed by Dave Cockrum. So Dave Cockrum is a product of his time. So he lived and breathed 1970s. So the whole disco era. And so when Dave Cockrum designs character, they look very similar. They all had this weird. They usually have like collars, popped up collars. These weird, funny boots. And women, they always have this weird, this very dated sash around their hip, like a beauty pageant. So when things look very 70-ish, that's all Dave Cockrum. But I mean, like back then, growing up, so I read all this in the '80s, so that actually was cool, because because we know the '70s, and so it didn't look too outlandish, but seeing it with adult eyes, many years later, you kind of have to laugh at the some of the costumes that Dave Cockrum designed and put on these characters. I mean, there's I'm not bagging on Dave Cockrum. There's a certain innocence and charm to his costume, but they very much stand out. So I'm adding like I know that Lady Deadpool has like multiple bands around her limbs. So originally I was gonna draw a like a holster, but I decided to not to because I realized that why would you have the gun holster on the left hand side when she's clearly right handed and she's gonna shoot from right handed. So I decided just completely abandon that idea of adding the gun holster on that side, and decided to just put it on the other side. So normally during the inking process, that whole side should be just colored, inked in as just solid black. But since this is a pencil stage, I like to add some more roundness by changing the value. So adding highlights and stuff in that black area. It's because it's also just looks cool. I mean, it's a lot of the thing people ask, like, why did you do certain thing? I get asked all the time, why did you do certain thing on, on this character? Or why did you change this costume or design point and all that? Or why did you have the character pose in a certain way? And the bottom line is, this is a comic book because they look cool. That's all it is, you know? I mean, it's not really rocket science. I mean, we draw things because it looks cool. I mean, that's the short answer. I'm pretty sure I'm gonna get you know, some flack from you know, gun nut, who's basically will tell me you drew the gun wrong. And it's just a comic book character. You're just basically drawing basic shapes. So I originally wanted to add, kind of have her hair pulled back in a ponytail, but I realized that I've seen a lot of cosplayers with the hair with their hair, down, where it's not tied down. So I've always liked girls with long flowing hair, so not in a ponytail. So when you're drawing hair, it's all about movement, movement, and treat it as one giant mass. Don't focus on individual strand of hair. You just want to like focus as a big giant mass, like a free flowing mass. So I'm just adding, just emphasizing the outline. Usually, if you have a really good pose down, you can just completely black out the bodies where it's just a silhouette, and if you can tell what's going on, then you actually succeeded as an illustrator. You succeeded as an artist because when it comes to art, illustration, especially in comic book art, is all about communication. And if people knows, you know, if people understand your drawing, then you succeeded. If they don't know what's going on, then you failed as an illustrator, as a comic book artist. And so just adding more shadows and folds in the clothes and stuff like that. Actually, this came out really, really nice. It always surprises me when drawing come out pretty good. So there it is, Lady Deadpool versus Wolverine.